everybody. As we all know, a poem is an expression born out of happiness, sorrow, anxiety, failure, disappointment, and sometimes a bit of advice to the readers. A poem is written abiding by the rules of how a poem should be written. The poem which I am going to discuss now has lot of poetic devices like metaphors, similes, etc. And it emphasizes the anguish of the man who has lost his wife. Now, let me go into the poem in detail. Old Love by Patmore. Old Love is a poem of love, compassion, and also anguish. The poet Patmore is a Hispanic poet, mostly known by the other language learners as South American poet. But to be precise, this word Hispanic includes Spanish and Portuguese and all the dialects spoken in Spain, Portugal, and all South American countries, including their colonies. Look at the face of the happy woman who has penned a ballad about her flesh and blood. Even though her origin is of Hispanic, she has spent her whole life in USA, North America. But she had spent her experiences and expertise on South and North American cultural exchanges. She was born on 19th January 1942. She has also worked as museum director and a consultant on US-Mexico youth exchanges. These are Patmore's recent books. Look at a title, Agua Santa. So we can infer that she started writing in her mother tongue first and switched over to English later. She has received a lot of awards for both English and Spanish, like Kellogg National Leadership Fellowship, 4 Southwest Book Awards, Premio Aslan Literature Award. Over to the poem now. Let me read the poem. When my aunt died, my uncle raised his hands like a prophet in the Bible. I have lost my girl, he said. I have lost my girl, over and over, shaking his head. Look at the lines spoken by the lady herself in first-person narrative. She's taking us to a bygone era when a tragedy struck at the doorstep of an uncle. She starts telling a story. When my aunt died, we are taken, or rather transported, to the house where the uncle mourns the death of his dearest wife. Look at the reflection and repetition of the lines. I have lost my girl. I have lost my girl. The poet also uses simile like a prophet, and a kind of allusion is referred. A prophet in the Bible, you have a raised hands of a prophet from the Old Testament of the Bible, where we see Moses raises his hand and divides the Red Sea. His helplessness is told by the words over and over, shaking his head, the resigned tone. Now let's go to the second stanza. I didn't know what to say, where to look, my quiet uncle raising his voice to silence. Here, the narrator expresses her helplessness in the scene of death. When she says, I didn't know what to say, she means that she didn't know how to console her uncle. Next, she says, where to look. The poet is in a dilemma whether to look at her uncle or the dead aunt. Her uncle's grief veils everything to silence. Here, the poet uses a poetic device like deafening silence, which is an oxymoron. We have the final stanza of the poem here. My aunt was 87. Listen, my uncle said, sighing like a tree alone at night. Women know every midnight on New Year's Eve, when others sang and laughed and hugged, your aunt looked at me, tears in her eyes. 60 years, she knew, one day we'd kiss goodbye. The final stanza of the poem is a narrative description. The aunt has spent 87 years, in which 60 years with this uncle. The uncle is sighing like a tree alone at night. Imagine the scenario. It is dark all over, a lone tree speaking the words, women know, every midnight on New Year's Eve, when others sang and laughed and hugged. Your aunt looked at me, tears in her eyes. You see, in the closing lines, there is another prophet there. She knew 60 years, and this day would be goodbye day. Emotions cannot be portrayed more than this. The closeness and togetherness against the loneliness. To sum up, we can say that this is a simple and emotive poem which moves the readers to tears. We have the poetic devices, which we have already discussed when we were doing the poem. You have the imagery, where through the words of the uncle, we are able to visualize the scene of the aunt lying dead. Try answering these questions to check if you have comprehended the poem. What is meant by Hispanic? Identify the similes used in the poem. How old was the aunt when she died? There are 3 options given. You have to put a tick. From whose perception is the poem told? Does the niece involve in the emotional scenario? Thank you.